I'd like to welcome everybody to this evening's webinar on hitting, talking about both power and efficiency. Before I get started, I just wanted to make a couple quick notes. The first is that from time to time in these webinars, we talk about progressive skills training, or PST, and some of you may be familiar with that, some of you may not. If you're not, we've done some webinars on PST, including a very basic PST primer, which is at our YouTube, recorded version is at our YouTube channel. You can either go to ZenoLink or YouTube /ZenoLink, or go to YouTube through our website, ZenoLink.com. And there's a whole bunch of videos. In fact, all the videos, all the webinars and a whole bunch of other stuff that we do is being gradually posted there. So it's a good resource in general, as well as the blog and the Facebook stuff. But as we talk, I'm not going to spend too much time going into the detail of PST. PST really being kind of a new spin on exercise, looking at exercise really in the shape of the activity itself, focused more on coordination than traditional strength and conditioning. So if you're not familiar with it, I would suggest that you go watch that, or at least the PST primer on the YouTube channel. And like I said, all these webinars will be recorded and posted as we can to the YouTube channel as well. Today we're going to talk about the biomechanics of hitting from a power and efficiency perspective. I think, you know, the old school mentality would say that you're either a power hitter or you're a contact hitter, and efficiency kind of being related a little bit more to a contact hitter. When you look at the biomechanics of the swing movement, it's clear that power and efficiency are actually go hand in hand. And that if you gain power through efficient mechanics, you'll not only gain bat speed and the ability to hit the ball harder and farther, but you'll also gain efficiency, which means consistency, less holes to be exploited by pitchers, and more effectiveness in terms of accuracy, waiting on pitches, you know, being able to pull the trigger later, all the things that go into you know, kind of more of your contact hitting. So what we're going to talk about really is the biomechanics of the movement, what produces what you see as the baseball swing, and this can be related to softball as well. There's some nuance and some difference, but certainly can be related to any kind of swing pattern. But the understanding that the biomechanics drives what you see as the superficial act of the swing, and when those biomechanics are efficient, you'll create the greatest amount of power, and you'll do that with the most consistency and the most accuracy. So we're going to talk about the blending of power and efficiency. There's three primary keys to power and efficiency. In order of importance, lower body mechanics. I'm going to define what lower body mechanics are. There's some subtleties to these things that I think, you know, there's a lot of really great information in this webinar tonight, but there's some really key subtleties that and I'll try hard to point them out and reiterate them enough that they kind of pop out at you, but there's some really key subtleties that make the difference in performance. In lower body mechanics, we're going to talk about the broad scope stuff, but there's some key subtleties to that really make the difference in terms of power and efficiency. Number two would be your core, and in particular, the ability to create a segmental sequence between the pelvis, the lower body, sort of defined by the pelvis, and the upper torso, or sort of the upper thoracic part of the torso, creating a sequence between the two, and being able to engage core musculature, stabilize the core, and then create a pattern of differentiation or dissociation, which allows leg drive or leg power, or torque, or ground reaction to be generated to produce power and sort of pass power along the chain. So key areas that are crucial to power: lower body mechanics and core, and they're crucial in that order, and those are the order that you typically see people break down. We see the most issue with lower body mechanics, followed by core. The last area is release, the ability to create bat speed via angular rotational or angular or rotational speed of the bat. There's much more bat speed available if that bat speed is created as a function of the bat working rotationally away from the body right through the impact zone. But in order to do that, you have to be able to brace, use the ground and stability to brace, to release the implement through the impact zone. And if you don't do that, you end up sweeping the bat through impact, and you lose a considerable amount of speed and efficiency. So again, the three keys to power production and efficiency lie in lower body mechanics, core, and with that differentiation or dissociation, sequencing, and lastly, release, the ability to brace and rotationally accelerate the bat into the impact zone. To describe what's going on in the baseball swing itself, sort of from the ground up, I chose the sequence, classic baseball swing, Mickey Mantle, right side of the plate, and what I'm going to do is kind of explain from the ground up what all is going on. Then we're going to go in and we're going to break it down in those three key areas: lower body, core, and release. So when a batter is essentially waiting for the pitch to come, they are, in a ready position. Their center of mass of their body is essentially aligned over the center of pressure between their 2 feet, and they're in a ready position or a ready posture. As they start to create the swing pattern, the ball is delivered, they go to swing, there's some sort of stride. Now, the mechanics of this vary all over the place. Some people have a big stride, some people don't. Some people stride, some people are, their stance is wider, they almost bring their foot back. Some people start with a very open stance, bring it closed. There's all kinds of stylistic ways that you can do this. So don't get caught up in the language as I speak through this, is the language of stride versus not stride, things like that. What we're essentially talking about is forward weight shift. Regardless of your style or your technique, as you start to initiate the swing, there's going to be a forward weight shift. That forward weight shift can be defined as the relationship between the center of mass and the center of pressure. And I'm not going to get into all the technical aspect of it. In fact, we'll probably have webinars down the road where we talk just about ground reaction force and what's going on, and kind of really get into more of the technical aspects of it. But for now, what we're talking about, what starts the swing, is a forward weight shift. Okay? So what happens as weight's being shifted forward, the foot comes in contact with the ground, whether it was already in contact with the ground, it was a stride or whatever, there's a meaningful connection to the ground by the lead leg. At that point in time, there is pushing against the ground. So we're creating shear force along the surface of the ground like this, and back on the back foot like this. And what then happens is, and depending on the style and whether you're more of a linear hitter, more rotational hitter, there's variance in terms of how much ground reaction force you place in the front side versus the back side. There's a lot of technical issues to it. But at the end of the day, you shift weight forward. The shifting of weight forward allows you to create force pushed into the ground along the surface ground, we call shear force. The ground reaction to that is what's translated then to the pelvis to create torque or rotational speed. This happens in a fraction of a second. Lower body mechanics are boiled down to the first few fractions of a second that the foot is in meaningful contact with the ground and weight is being shifted forward. However you want to look at that from a technique perspective or from a stylistic perspective, it doesn't matter. Regardless of who the hitter is, the swing is initiated by that forward weight shift and torque, which creates rotational speed of the pelvis. The nuance here, and I'm trying to get across here, is that lower body speed contribution to power occurs immediately upon foot contact with the ground, however you want to define that again. It happens immediately upon meaningful foot contact and weight shift, not down here, not into this area, not after we're already swinging through the ball, or even back here with his hips wide open on that. The hips are already out of play. So when we're talking about how can we train for power, the best hitters in the world are explosive. When they put that foot down on the ground, however, again, let's define that. When they press forward and create torque, they are immediately creating a massive amount of rotational speed at the pelvis. 4, 5, 6, 700 degrees per second of rotational speed immediately upon weight shifts forward. Not out here. right here, the second, the fraction of a second, that's what comes to counterweight. That is incredibly important to understand that, because it's from that dynamic, then we then create exercise to emphasize those body postures and explosiveness to get more power out of the lower body. Okay, so what happens then? Let me erase these. The lower body then begins to accelerate rotationally around the bottom of the spine. The core musculature is engaged, it's stretched, it rapidly responds with a dynamic contraction. As it contracts, grips the lower body or the pelvis to accelerate the upper body. So you get a sequence. Ground reaction force creating rotational speed at the pelvis, core muscular engagement creating the next sequence, which is rotational speed at the upper thoracic or the upper torso. The next thing is the upper torso, the musculature of the upper back, the shoulders, the arms. Again, pre-stretched, rapid contraction or stretch response. The upper torso decelerates and accelerates the arms forward. So we have this sequence of forward weight shift, torque, lower body acceleration, upper body acceleration, arm acceleration. And then, as we get through the impact zone, we translate all that speed to the back. And the bat is actually going to now accelerate rotationally from the arms into the impact zone with maximal distal end speed occurring right at collision, with the vast majority of that speed driving squarely into the ball for maximum compression on the ball. So again, the keys here in the sequence really are the initial push forward or press forward, creating torque, which creates rotational speed, translated through the core, the musculature of the core, upper body speed, translated through the musculature of the upper body, arm speed, translated through the arms, bat rotational speed. So if you think of a line almost like from the top of the sternum to the wrist to the bat, that angle, the acceleration of the bat through the impact zone is what creates maximum distal end speed. If we create a sound sequence of events, we're going to be very efficient, very explosive, very efficient, very consistent about how we move. We're also going to be creating maximal distal end speed. If we miss a step in the sequence, or one sequence becomes more of a power leak than a power generator, and we have breakdown either coordination or speed output or some aspect of the biomechanics of the movement, then we start to get compensation. We can still generate pretty good bat speed, but it's done at a cost. It's done at a cost of efficiency, consistency. There's going to be holes in our swing that pitchers can exploit. And our power output, although we can move the bat with reasonable speed, is going to be limited. And our ability to create any more power is going to be sort of capped. So again, the sequence is lower body, creating a weight shift, creating torque, creating rotational speed at the pelvis, sequencing to the upper torso, sequencing to the arms, and then to the back. So what does this look like when we look at it biomechanically when we strip away the hitter? Let's strip away the style, the technique, all the nuance, of the superficial, and let's just get to the core of it. At the core, all great hitters look about the same, even though they come at it with many different types of anatomies, many different types of styles and philosophies. Their bodies are performing roughly the same pattern over and over again across the board from hitter to hitter throughout the ages, from the old-timers all the way to the current greats. So what that pattern essentially looks like here when you look at it biomechanically or graphically is what we call the kinetic link. And the kinetic link is essentially boils down to the ability to segmentally summate speed. You work from big, heavy segments to lighter segments. Each time you work to a successively lighter segment, you gain speed. So it's a lot like cracking a whip. You grab the big base handle to crack the whip end. So there's a really fine taper that works from the handle all the way down to the whip end, which is a very fine, small whip end. The taper allows you to transfer speed by conserving momentum or segmentally summating speed, just like you would in the baseball swing. Now think about the same analogy. Instead of cracking the bullwhip from the handle, you grab the whip side, the small little tapered whip side, and try to whip the handle. It doesn't work very well. So the body works more efficiently when it works from the big muscles in the big body segments to the eventually all the way out to the implement. In this case, we're talking about a baseball bat. So what we're looking at here is a baseball swing from foot contact or initial forward weight shift to bat and ball contact. So you can look, first of all, the thing to understand is this graph depicts a half a second total. From here to here depicts less than a half a second, like a quarter of a second. So we're talking about things happening at incredibly ballistic speed, right? So when I say, at literally the fraction second that foot is firmly connected to the ground and there's a forward weight shift, that's when you need speed out of the lower body, and that's what happens. You have the initiation of weight shift. You then have acceleration of the lower body, the pelvis, we call hip segment. You're going to then get a rapid acceleration, a deceleration, which is a function of the core musculature being engaged to accelerate the upper torso, which we call shoulder segment, but you can think of it as like the upper torso, upper thoracic. That accelerates to a peak speed. The muscles of the upper back, arms, shoulders are engaged. They're stretched. They're shortening. Ballistically, they decelerate. They then launch the arms, accelerate the arms. Here's your bullwhip action. The arms accelerate to just prior, the blink of an eye, just prior to impact with the ball. They rapidly decelerate, and the back gets accelerated with maximum rotational speed to the impact zone. This is going to get us our greatest distal end speed, which we can look at in terms of bat speed, not miles per hour. This is going to get us our most efficient and our greatest bat speed. So what we want to look at when we evaluate hitters is how effectively they connect with the ground, how effectively they use their connection to the ground to create torque, how effectively that torque is then translated to pelvic rotational speed, how effectively they then stabilize and sequence through the core to pass that speed up the chain to the upper body, and then how well they work between the upper body, their arms, and the bat to pass that speed out to the bat so that it's at maximum rotational and distal end acceleration through the impact zone. So let's talk a little bit about lower body mechanics. I chose this picture because lower body mechanics, as I said, occur immediately upon weight shift, way before you're looking for it, way before you would assume it's there. That's when lower body mechanics are occurring. Right here, right when that hitter decides they're going to pull the trigger is literally when the lower body needs to be explosive and contributing to speed. If it's any later, you're out of luck, and now you become, more of an arm swinger, and you've got all kinds of compensation stuff going on. So I picked this picture for lower body mechanics because it's literally at the fraction of a second that the hitter decides to pull the trigger that lower body mechanics become important. Here's some logistical stuff. In your elite level hitters, in Major League Baseball or any elite level hitter, stride length on average tends to be about 3.8 times hip width if you look at hip width from hip center to hip center. So stride length, there's variation on that parameter, but that's a pretty good benchmark. 3.8 times hip width. If you're too short or too narrow with that stride, you're going to impact your ability to lead leg stabilize, push against the ground, create torque. If you're too wide, you're going to have the same kind of impact. You're not going to be able to push and pull and create torque as effectively. 3.8 times, no matter what the style is going into it, on average, hitters are landing about 3.8 times their hip width in terms of stride length. Stride direction is about 12 degrees closed. Okay, so they're not striding straight. They're certainly not striding open. They're striding 12 degrees closed. Again, no matter what the style of hitting, you'll see these numbers come up over and over again. Small variation, but for the most part, 12 degrees closed. Foot direction, 65 degrees. So if you're looking here, if this is 90, like this would be 45. 65 degree, the foot position is at about a 65 degree. So it's not straight at the pitcher, and it's not totally closed. It's a little bit open at about 65 degrees. Why? Well, the ability to stride forward, a little bit closed, and a 65 degree foot angle allows the front foot in particular to push at a trajectory or at a direction along the ground that allows the ground reaction to be applied most perpendicular to the pelvic girdle. So if you think of the pelvis as kind of a bar, it's going to be applied most perpendicular at foot contact for the initial burst of speed. if the hips are too closed, too open, you know, things like that, and that's affected by higher striding, you're not, so just think of it as a pure engineering problem, a beam problem. Here's your beam. If the force is applied perpendicular to the beam, you're going to get your maximum torque. So that's what's going on with the stride, and it's anatomically driven. So one of the things I would say right away, with your young hitters in particular, is get them in these positions right away. I have an 8-year-old daughter who's played softball now 2 years. This is the first year she's seen live pitching. She just turned 8. She was 7 during last baseball season. And I started her in this stride position, a little bit less than 3.8 to make it a little more comfortable to begin with. And as she got more comfortable, we widened it a little bit. But I basically started her in that position. We eliminated the stride altogether. That doesn't mean we eliminated the forward weight shift. It just made, we eliminated her striding open, striding closed, striding too long, striding too short. As you're teaching people mechanics, there's so many variabilities in the stride. Eliminate it until they get a feel for what that 3.8 times hip width, 12-degree close, 65-degree position is. Then they can repeat it over and over again. So this is more the logistics of it. The dynamics of it is the second they pull the trigger and there's the initiation of weight transfer, the lower body has to be explosively accelerated. So it's literally right in this picture, just after this picture, that lower body is participating with its maximum force output. I don't think that most of us realize that, and most of us are thinking about much later into the swing. And so as a result, when we train and look at training both technique as well as strength conditioning, we train in postures that aren't as effective for creating ballistic speed. So I've got a bunch of these things, and we call it PFT. They're not to take the place of strength and conditioning. They're not to take the place of coaching and technique. I mean, that's, you know, but what they're doing is they're using the principles of strength and conditioning in the context of a baseball swing to produce coordination patterns. So here's a very simple exercise. There's a million variations of these things, but here's a very simple exercise I want to show you as just an example of how we can facilitate lower body speed. Now, you would think, well, if we're putting something that restricts lower body movement, how can we possibly be facilitating speed? The reason we're facilitating speed is what we do is we use a ball that's appropriately sized to get the hitter in that, you know, 3.5 to 3.8 times hip width stance, okay? And when we get them in that stance, we then lock the hips in. So now the foot is going to push against the ground and is going to push perpendicular to the hip because we're locked into that position. So now if I take a swing into, say, an impact bag, and you won't want to swing at baseballs because obviously with a restricted lower body, you don't want to do a full follow through at speed or you're going to get hurt. So you're going to hit into something, an impact bag, a heavy bag, a tire, doesn't matter. But here's the deal. You lock the lower body into the ideal position, and there's variations of what we can do with this, a ton of different stuff. And then what you do is you just swing into the lower, and what happens is you learn to apply ground reaction force effectively into the ground at the right time. And so this is the beginning. Now we would obviously move away from restricting the lower body and introduce speed development exercises into the mix as well. But to start, this is an absolutely crucial exercise to teaching a hitter where the speed comes from, where the power comes from. If you put them in a position where they're able to create torque that's effective in creating rotational speed, their rotational speed will go up instantaneously. Automatically goes up. And the timing of the speed improves. So if it was late, we make it earlier so it now can participate in the power process. So here's a very simple exercise, and I say it's an exercise. It's not swing technique. We're not teaching people how to swing from a mechanics perspective. It's an exercise, but it's an exercise with the highest degree of specificity, where we're actually putting the body in postures and moving at speeds and at planes that are identical to a swing, while we're essentially working on leg strength, ground reaction, and explosive speed with the lower body. Okay, so core differentiation now. Here's a key to understand that what happens is, as we explained it before a little bit, but as you get your initial weight shift, acceleration of the lower body, you're going to get the lower body accelerating against the lagging upper body. It happens in the blink of an eye. if you have super slow motion video, you can kind of see it. Biomechanically, you can measure it, but it's something that happens at super high speed. What happens, though, as the lower body accelerates against the slightly lagging upper body, is you get a dynamic pull on the musculature, and then the muscles respond very quickly with a ballistic contraction. The key, though, for this to occur is that we have to have good orientation of the spine, good spine stability. We have to work perpendicular to the spine, and we have to have the lower body accelerating against the upper body. If that's done, the musculature gets pulled along its most natural line of action, and we get a very effective shortening or response to that stretch, which is a dynamic ballistic shortening or contraction. When that's done, then we get a very forceful acceleration. We get not only the muscular input, but we also get the whip action, and we get the benefit of exponentially increasing speed. Okay? What's important to know about that is, even though it doesn't look like it, in golf, there's a huge backswing and a lot of separation. In baseball, it doesn't look like it, but the dynamic load on the core is on average 60 degrees of differentiation between the lower body and the upper body. That's a tremendous amount of differentiation between the lower body and the upper body, and it happens ballistically and dynamically as a function of good lower body mechanics, good core stability, and good core coordination. Here's an exercise, and again, this is just one. There's many exercises that we have like this where we emphasize certain aspects of the movement in a strength and conditioning kind of thing. So you can go to the gym, you should go to the gym, and you can do any kind of like rotational core exercises and core bracing. So you want to have core isometric strength as well as core rotational like dynamic strength. So you can do Russian switch, you can do med ball toss, you can do bridges, planking, combinations of those things in the gym. What we want to do is take that same atmosphere and bring it into the baseball swing itself to give it the highest degree of specificity to train coordination and timing under the gun in the baseball swing. So here what I have is a sitting. Now I'm sitting on a chair in this. We can sit on a Swiss ball for a little bit less stability, inducing a little bit more lower body function, things like that. There's many variations we can do here. But what we do is we sit in a chair on the edge of the chair, so we're dynamic here. Start over here where we're starting. We're on the edge of the chair. We're not sitting back. We're right up on the chair. And you can tell I have 12 degrees closed, 65-degree foot angle, and my hip width or my feet should be somewhere in that 3.5 to 3.8, 4 times my hip width range. So I'm trying to mimic ground reaction even while I'm sitting. But what the cool thing about this is what we do is we take the lower body out of the equation, not completely, but enough that we're really emphasizing the core contraction, anchoring, and acceleration of the upper torso. So we're not creating differentiation because the lower body has to accelerate against the upper body to create it, but we're from a position, we're using differentiation to accelerate the upper thoracic or the upper torso. So we're emphasizing core contraction. So we've got to stabilize at speed, and we've got to dynamically or ballistically contract diagonally, again, at speed. So it's an exercise that we can do at speed that's going to improve coordination. Okay, last thing we'll talk about before we summarize, and I'll just show you a little bit of, I'll show you what kind of impact looking at coordination can have on bat speed and overall efficiency. The last thing is bat release and this idea of bracing. Angular speeds at your best level players start at about 1,500 degrees per second and go up from there. So if you think about what we're talking about the top of the spine to the wrist to the bat itself, the angle there, essentially. So the speed at which the bat releases or whips from the body away from the arms, there's all kinds of ways that's described, the wrist action, but it's essentially the length of the bat accelerating away from the arms. 1,500 degrees per second will create 70 plus miles, 75 plus. The really powerful hitters are in the 80s and even high. Well, once you get in the 80s, you're pretty much topped out. But the distal and bat speed through the impact zone. So a good release speed creates maximum distal end speed. If you want power, you have to release the bat with its maximum angular speed through the impact zone. The only way to do that, well, first is sequencing all the way up the chain, okay, to create that speed. But then to transfer it to the bat, we rely on what we call bracing. So right through the impact zone, we see a dramatic stiffening or bracing of the body. Again, these things take place over like literally fractions of a second. But when that occurs, the bat flies away. So it's sort of like you're in your car, you jam on the brakes, and the groceries you have in the front seat go flying. So it's, or you got a bucket of water you're trying to throw on a fire, and you have to stop everything and just decelerate dramatically to get the water to fly out of the bucket. It's the same basic thing. So the ability to brace and whip the bat and accelerate the bat away from the body is absolutely crucial once you've gone through all this other stuff. Here's again, a really basic exercise. There's many, many variations of this, but here's a basic one where we're going to try to employ the ball to create a good lower body interaction. We'll also create and foster a good core connection and better sequencing. And we're going to use an impact bag here, or like a heavy bag or something like that. And then what I have in my hand instead of a bat is a towel. Okay. The reason we're using a towel is that a bat is a rigid implement and can be manipulated by the wrist and the hand. So it may look like you're accelerating the bat, but really what you're doing is forcing the bat away. You're not getting any kind of significant bat acceleration, and typically the timing's off, so that you're not accelerating it through the impact zone. So what we do to emphasize brace and acceleration of the implement is we swing something that we can't manipulate with the hands because it's not a rigid body. So we use a towel or a rope. And the way we do this is we hold it just like a bat. We hold, if we're right-handed here, we're going to hold the left side of the towel, the one end and the left side, and we're going to hold on to that firmly. The right side, we're going to hold the other end of the towel, kind of fold it over, and we're going to hold that lightly. And then what we're going to do is we're going to accelerate just like we're swinging into the bag, and then we're going to stop our body, which is bracing. It really comes from connection to the ground and core, not the arms. You brace, and you fire the towel into the impact bag by bracing. So you get to start to teach the body how to brace and release without having a rigid implement. And then there's ways that we can do it by using one hand on the bat and rigid body and start to blend and take the ball out and do different types of dynamics. But this is a really good one to teach the body how to brace, how to use connection to the ground, how to use core, and how to use the extremities to decelerate and to accelerate the implement. Okay, I'm just going to go back here really quick. I just want to show you. On the graph, you can see peak speed, peak speed, peak speed. Impact, the only thing accelerating through the impact zone, which is a fraction of a second, is the bat. Everything else is decelerating. This is what we call bracing. Now, after that, we're going to, we're going to then re-accelerate as we get up over here. But through the impact zone, the only thing that's accelerating is the bat, and that's where we get those massive speeds. All right, we're going to wrap up here, getting right at about half an hour. I like to keep these to about half an hour. So here's, and I'm going to show you real quick before just what this can do in terms of bat speed. So we have here just a quick summary. In order to do this, obviously we're going to propose ZenoLink, but you have to have some ability to measure these things. You can't visually see them because they happen too fast, and they're three-dimensional, and they're anatomically driven, and you can do a lot with 2D video, but making these kinds of measurements is pretty much impossible. So with the ZenoLink type of 3D test, we can look at lower body mechanics, at your ability to create ground reaction force, create rotational speed, use the lower body to start the process, and look at the timing of that. We can then look at core stability and core coordination, the things we just talked about. Your ability to stabilize the spine and dynamically and sequentially work through the core from pelvis to upper thoracic or upper torso. Correct segmental sequencing. The next thing is the arms drive and the extremity and the bat drive off the core. We don't want the arms outpacing the body. The body should drive the core. So we want acceleration to come off the core. It's just like any kind of Olympic lift or any kind of other activity you can think of. You don't want the extremities doing the work. You want the big muscles doing the work. You want the extremities to drive off of the core. effective bat release, looking at how much, when, and the impact of that relative to collision with the ball, and then the application of speed, which we didn't talk too much about, but the actual direction of speed into the ball, so we get good compression on the ball, and you get a ton of bat speed and hit the ball constantly. So we want to see how effectively the bat is being driven into the ball when we measure that. And then from all that information, we can create a customized coordination-based training program, which we refer to as Progressive Skills Training, or PST. And that program should augment what you're doing with your coaches on technique and what you're doing with your strength conditioning people in the gym. It should augment, and it should blend together with, and it should maximize your efforts. The last thing I'm trying to show you really quick, hopefully I didn't get signed out, is a couple quick samples. And all I'm going to do is show you bat speed and kinetic link. This is a high school level athlete. We have here, just really quick, we had the bat release at impact was only 1,000 compared to, like I said, about 1,500, which is about average for elite level. Bat distal end speed was only 41 miles per hour, as opposed to the elite level, which I said was about 70 average. Obviously there's some variation there. But so you can see upon initial test, we had, we're off the mark a bit. Of course, it's high school, so you have to look at that. But you can see that we're off the mark a bit there. When we look at the kinetic link, remember the one I showed you, red, blue, green, black, all right, hips, shoulders, arms, bat. You can see in this particular case, we don't have that sequence. What we have is impact here, very little lower body, all arms, release of the bat then becomes early, the bat tapers off, and then we get some compensation through impact, but a lot of distal and speed is being lost there, okay? So when we then employ, in addition to strength and conditioning and in addition to the coaching aspect, we employ coordination training, or PST, based on what we saw in that, plus the other data where we looked at lower body mechanics and spine stability and all that stuff. Now, when we look here, we're going to see release speed now has gone up to 1240, so we've got to get a good increase there. Bat speed has jumped up to 54, so we've significantly now increased distal and bat speed, which is great. When we look at the kinetic link and where it's coming from, we're starting to see a pretty good pattern here now. We're looking at lower body, upper body, arms, bat, and we're getting that bat being released to the impact zone, and we've got good bracing now. So in a matter of a couple months, employing coordination training with the strength conditioning and the coaching, we see a significant improvement in distal end speed through better coordination. So this hitter not only has more power, but also is more efficient in movement, which is going to make their ability to wait on pitches, see pitches, go with off-speed pitches, less holes to be exploited, the ability to pull the trigger later, all those good things, more explosive. All those things go with almost 10-mile-an-hour jump in speed on the distance, which is incredible. So when you look at what's going wrong, coordination as well as with technique and strength and conditioning and mobility, you see it opens a whole new window to performance. And power can be really a derivative, not of just getting in the gym and building bigger muscles, but of efficiency. And when power is a derivative of efficiency, you have the best of both worlds. You now have bat speed and power with more consistent and accurate mechanics, which allows you sort of the best of both worlds. And then, obviously we can work to tweak power and tweak consistency as we move forward. So I'm going to wrap up there. I did see that there were some questions. I tend not to answer questions in the webinars because I try to keep them short. I'm already 10 minutes over. I will answer questions via email, anyone who had asked them. And if you didn't ask anybody had some, just email me and I will surely answer the questions, or we can set up a phone call depending on the complexity of the questions to talk about it. So again, I appreciate you joining the webinar. This will be posted on our YouTube channel and the blogs and Facebook and all that stuff soon. And we're doing our best to get all the past stuff up as well. Next week we're going to try to do pitching, and we're going to wrap up with baseball until later when we come back and we talk about really the more technical aspects and really specific areas and really very specific exercise protocols and stuff like that. So in terms of broad scope overview, last week we did running, or base stealing. If you didn't see the base stealing, go to YouTube and watch it. I think it's great stuff. No one's talking about base stealing right now. Today we did hitting. Next week we're going to try to do pitching and then move on to a different sport. So hopefully if you didn't catch the running, you'll catch that on YouTube, and then be looking out for the invites for next week when we do pitching. Everyone have a great evening or day, depending on where you're at, and hope to see you next week at our next webinar. Thanks for coming.